father was an alcoholic, and it could be a very volatile situation at times, even the best that I can remember. At the age of 4, my parents separated, but during that time, they were expecting their second child, which was my sister. And however, my sister never really got to spend any time with my dad or know him, and by the time I was 5, within a few more months, my parents divorced. And it was during that time of the separation that my father was also having an affair. Ended up marrying the lady that he was actually having an affair with. So their life was really different, and most of the time when I would go to their home, it would be a situation where they were intoxicated most of the time. But as the years passed, my stepmother came to know the Lord, and it was after that that our relationship really strengthened, and because I knew the Lord by this time, and so we really just began to spend more time together, and I really grew to love her and became very close to her. And as the years passed, our lives just connected more, and we were able to talk about the Lord together and our heart's desire for my father to come to know the Lord. And I wouldn't say I didn't necessarily have the courage to share with him at that time, but it was always in my heart, and I would pray for him on a regular basis. And this was probably from the time I was, like I said, later in high school, and especially from college on. And I prayed for him consistently for, I don't know, probably 20 years. As I got married, that desire just really increased even more. And that's because I was growing stronger in my faith. I'd gotten a phone call saying that my father was being put into the hospital, that he was having open heart surgery, and that it was very likely that he may not make it through this. It was almost as if, I guess you could say, I was bargaining with the Lord. I remember saying, if you'll get me home, if you'll just get me home, I will share with him. I, just shared with him more and about my life and about what the Lord could do in his life. And we talked a little bit about heaven and hell. And one of the things that will always be imprinted on my mind was, as we had that conversation, he was going to be going into surgery in about an hour. And he just looked at me and said to me, when we talked about the heaven and hell, he said, well, honey, we've all got to go somewhere. And he just wasn't ready. He wasn't willing to accept the Lord. And I just remember thinking, okay, Lord, I've done my part. You got me home. I shared. And I remember telling him, Daddy, you don't have to do this even with me right now. If you choose to do that as you go in, before you go into that operating room, you can do so. And we talked about how that he may come out of this and he may not. It's much more difficult to share with your family than anyone else. It's never easy, but yet it's the Holy Spirit that gives you that boldness and that courage. I guess it was 7 or 8 years that passed, and my dad still didn't, I knew he had not accepted the Lord into his life. I began to talk to him about it again, and at that time, it was very obvious that his heart had really softened, and he had just really mellowed. So it became really apparent that he was finally ready, and he broke down and he began to cry, and he began to say again that he felt like he had to clean up his own mess, that he needed to get this in order and this in order and this in order. And I just remember looking at him again and saying, Daddy, we've had this discussion before. You don't have to do that. You just have to have your heart be open and let the Lord come in, and he will take care of that. So there were a few scriptures that I shared with him. He listened, and he was broken. For the first time in his life, I saw that he was broken. So they're in that bedroom. He prayed, and he asked the Lord to come in and be the leader of his life. And we talked about what the next steps were and how he could begin to grow and into a deeper relationship with the Lord. And it was shortly after that he followed up with believer's baptism. and he began to go to church and get involved as much as he could. He went regularly, consistently. He had never, ever done that his whole life. And he began to go with my stepmother, and again, they went consistently. And 2 years, this was actually 2 years before he passed away. This Pastor Don gives you the tools and equips you to be able to share your faith more effectively. I just want to encourage you to take that step of faith, to be willing to allow the Holy Spirit to work through you, let Jesus live through you, let others around you just see Jesus in you, and the Holy Spirit will do the rest if you just, again, open up your heart and just be obedient to walking through that door and sharing your faith.